Hi, this is Trish Thomas-Mink. I've written blogs before on MKUltra, usually as a historical Cold War project. I want to bring it forward to more of a today project. Our government, and maybe even beyond our government, is leading a collective thought and the path for the entire future. We are constantly being groomed. Even more, there are those among us who are being used and manipulated on a completely different level. First, let's go back to the original mind control program, Project MKUltra, and what it did. It was a CIA sanctioned program in the early 1950s, and it was led by none other than Allen Dulles. The same Allen Dulles that President Kennedy fired, the man that became part of the Warren Commission. Anyway, it was set up based on experiments in World War II Germany, experiments on human beings. The scope of Project MKUltra was broad, with research undertaken at 80 institutions, including 44 colleges and universities, as well as hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Here are 5 of the experiments performed on unsuspecting people. 1. Uppers and downers. A test subject was hooked up to 2 IVs. In one arm would be the barbiturates, or the downers, and in the other, the amphetamines, or the uppers. First would come the downers. When the subject was relaxed to the point of passing out, they would turn on the amphetamines and jack them up. It would create a sudden jolt of energy and leave the person babbling incoherently. It was a great time to ask questions and gain useful information. Sub-Project 54. Techniques were used to cause brain concussions, either weapons or sound waves that would leave no physical mark. They were used to create amnesia in order to brainwash a subject. It started as an office of the Naval Research Project and was transferred over to MKUltra in 1955. The CIA denies it, but documents reveal they gained valuable intel from the process. Number 3. The Canadian experiments. Donald Cameron was paid $69,000 in 1957 through 1964 to go to Canada and experiment on people at McGill University. That is about the equivalent of $539,120 that Cameron was paid. They used paralytic drugs and then exposed people to recorded repetitive statements. They also used electric shock therapy, sensory deprivation, and large doses of LSD to break down a person's personality in order to rebuild it or even entirely replace it. Number 4, hypnosis. There were 8 sub-projects under hypnosis. They created hypnotic-induced anxiety to heighten a person's memory recall. It allowed the subject to recall more. They studied the relationship between hypnosis and the polygraph test. They studied the relationship between personality of hypnosis and susceptibility. Of course, they wanted people who were susceptible. They used it to brainwash people and convert them to spies and couriers without their consent or knowledge. 5. The Midnight Climax. In 1955, they used 3 safe houses in San Francisco. They paid prostitutes to lure clients and dose them with LSD while the CIA observed them. The men were completely unaware of the experiment. They later took it out to bars, restaurants, and beaches. Prior to San Francisco, this experiment was done in New York City. It was discontinued after the death of Agent Frank Olson. Frank Olson either leapt or was pushed to his death in 1953, 9 days after being heavily dosed with LSD. There's another blog I've written about Frank Olson, and at the bottom I will include the link to click to it. Historians assert creating a Manchurian candidate subject through mind control techniques was the goal of MKUltra and the other related CIA projects. A controlled assassin that could be turned on with a phone call or a word, developed by torture, drugs, and mind control. So let's bring this forward, as supposedly the program ended in 1973. Or did it? What if you could develop a whole culture? As a culture, we are used to being fed information and accepting it without questioning. The mainstream media does it all the time. They exaggerate and outright lie to us daily. They are grooming us to accept ideals and behavior they want us to have. It's not new. It's been going on for decades. It is way beyond the paid grade of the media on the level that I'm speaking about. If it were not for the internet and independent news sources, we would react to it as we did in the 1950s and 60s. Those who accepted the information got along in society. Those who did not were outcasts and live on the fringes. It is really seen clearly since the election of 2016. We are completely now polarized as a nation. We are programmed daily how to respond to the topics of racism, gender identification, gender roles, which is completely different than it was 60 years ago, sexual appropriate behavior, and the list goes on. In the 1970s, we began to understand that we were being programmed, or at least provoked. Advertising was a huge part of the development and use subliminal techniques. There's a body of work by an author, Wilson Bryan Key, including a book called The Age of Manipulation, The Con and Confidence. He states that over an extended period of time, the constant bombardment of subliminal stimuli can lead to permanent changes of organ systems and their complex processes. It can change and even exhaust those systems. We were taught that commercials on TV were enticing us to buy exact products they were selling by posting subliminal messages within the commercials, and then on the outline there were even more subtle effects. Even though the FCC supposedly banned the use of subliminal messaging in 1974, advertising has become an art form of its own, a type of hypnosis. If you really think about the ramifications, it is startling at best and frightening at its worst. Not only are we subliminally being sent messages by media in the news, opinion blogs, and by celebrities, but we're also being exposed to ideas over and over again until we're desensitized. Violence is one of the most damaging. First, there's the tolerance and the excitement of the police chase attached to movies and TV. It gets us used to the ideas. And then it's painted as honorable. They're doing it for a cause. They're standing up for an ideal. It's the old good versus evil. That's why I killed those people. Then it moves to cool, hip, and reasonable. They deserved it for what they did. First, seeing dead people made me uncomfortable. It's still pretty horrific. But I'm more used to it now. And if I can justify it in my mind, I'm less bothered. As a society, we can tolerate more if our government and our fellow citizens tell us it's okay. We saw that this year with Antifa during the election process. The idea was that it was good for violence. The people who got it deserved it, and they were standing up for an ideal. The weaker, more susceptible mind will always go along with that. Innocence can be recaptured by a large degree. In so many ways, we are being fed what to think and how to believe. The problem is that most go along with it. If it is done by a celebrity, well then, we're certain that it could be true. If they say it will help the poor, or the environment, or it is attached to love, or becoming evolved, if you oppose it, you're either stupid or you're a monster, regardless of whether any of those standards are ever provable or met. Total falsehoods can and are turned into noble truths over time by getting people used to new ideals and new values gradually. So question everything, accept nothing at face value. Make choices, be led less. We the people are still in charge, even though it doesn't feel like it. We do it as a group, so find your group. Many believe the world completely changed after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I am one. His desire to rid the country of organized crime, the C.I.A., to bring the troops home from Vietnam, his wanting the civil rights legislation to go through. He was on the path to restoring the country to the people. Clearly, there were those in power who did not want that, which is why in 1968, when Bobby Kennedy tried to run for president, he was killed also. We also lost Martin Luther King, who preached love and passive change. After that, as a country, we were anesthetized with drugs and called it freedom, change, and progress.